I'm about to show you some of the most beautiful paintings to come out of Denmark. These are made by the artist Hans Andersen Brendekilde. You may not know who he is. Well, I guess now you do, but you've seen a painting of his last week if you're subscribed to this channel. This beautiful portrait of L.A. Ring was painted by Brendekilde. Brendekilde and Ring were friends, in fact. I didn't say this in my last video, but Lords Andersen and Hans Andersen were both friends and exhibited along each other, and to not get confused, both of them decided to adopt as last names their birthplace, Ring and Brendekilde. But this video isn't about the two friends' relationship, though I could go on about how cute Brendekilde was, painting his friend working near Asum Smithy or next to a fallen easel. No, this video isn't about them, nor is it about Brendekilde's beautiful paintings, though, as you may certainly agree, they're gorgeous. I want to talk about this painting in particular. Despite it not being his most beautiful, it's definitely his most popular. This painting is colossal. It's over 2 meters tall and 2.7 meters wide. It was painted in 1889 for the Paris World Exhibition, which celebrated the 100th anniversary of the French Revolution. It sparked controversy, would you believe it, because it depicted the poverty and miserable conditions of the working class, or, in this case, the peasant class. The bourgeoisie criticized it for being too dramatic and political. If you've been watching my channel for a while, this situation will remind you of Jean-François Millet's The Gleaners, which was also controversial for being too political. I made a whole video on the politics of The Gleaners. Both paintings of the second half of the 19th century were realist paintings, not realist in the sense that they look photorealistic, but realist in the sense that they depicted reality as it was. Not idealized or focused on the lavishness of modernity, but showing the misery that most people at the time struggled with. This art movement spread at the same time as a general suspicion for the inequalities created by industrialism. This art movement, though it may not always look like it, was deeply political, and the bourgeoisie feared it. Courbet showed us stonebreakers, Millet showed us gleaners, Caillebotte showed us floor scrapers, Repin showed us barge haulers, Ring showed us a sewer, and Brendekilde showed us this. The scene is set in a large, quiet field. The field is interrupted by small heaps of rocks. Someone's been painstakingly picking them up and piling them together to collect them. And among these heaps of rocks, this detailed field, an old man lies on the ground. His left wooden shoe fell off. His clothes are filled with dirt. The rocks he was carrying in his shirt have all fallen next to him. The man may be dead. He dropped like a rock and laid there among other rocks, heavy and inanimate. But I would argue that this man isn't the subject of this painting. He's a prop for the actual main subject, the woman. She could be his daughter, his wife, or his co-worker. However, in any case, I would argue that she's the main subject of this painting. 4 years before Brendekilde painted this masterpiece, another similar work was created. Ilya Repin's Ivan the Terrible and his son Ivan. I've made a video about it a long time ago if you want to check it out. On the surface, there might not be that many similarities between Repin's and Brendekilde's work. Ivan and his son are in a palace, not in a field. It's in a dark interior, not in broad daylight. Ivan killed his son, and you can see the blood from the injury, which isn't the case in Worn Out. However, both share a similarity insofar as one subject holds another, the other either being in pain or dying. What really makes these paintings masterpieces is the reaction of the first subject. In Ivan the Terrible and his son Ivan, Ivan's reaction is one of fear, regret, and grief, all mixed together. His eyes convey all these emotions at the same time. In Worn Out, the reaction is completely different. I don't see fear or regret, but panic, powerlessness, and perhaps even anger. The woman's holding the man's head tenderly, but yelling at the top of her lungs, perhaps calling out for help or to externalize her anger. The powerlessness here is heartbreaking. She can't help him. She can't carry him. She can't heal him. All she can do is cry for help, knowing it might not do much, but at least she would have tried. This reaction or this situation entirely can have strong political implications, even more so than in The Gleaners. In Ivan the Terrible and his son Ivan, we know who the murderer is. We see his face. The violence is perpetrated by someone, and we get to see who did it. In Worn Out, there's no murderer. We can't see his face because he doesn't have one. We have the perfect example of the difference between interpersonal violence and structural violence. The term structural violence was only coined in 1969 by Norwegian sociologist Johan Galtung, but the effects of it have been documented, as you may have guessed, for a very long time. If interpersonal violence is easily identifiable, as it is in Ivan the Terrible and his son Ivan, structural violence is harder to pinpoint. First, when violence is committed by a single person or by a gang, this violence is visible, even more so when weapons are involved. But structural violence isn't committed by a single person or by a gang, but by an entire social structure. Often, because this structure is perceived as natural, it's harder to see its violent consequences or the violence baked into it. Second, when you live the consequences of structural violence, it's very hard to seek justice. You know something's unfair, that you don't have to suffer, yet you are. If someone is violent against you, there's always a way to seek justice. If violent consequences from an unfair system kills your father, you have no recourse. You're left alone and completely powerless. This interpretation may be wrong. It's possible that this man worked himself to death out of his own will because of stubbornness, but judging by the reaction of the bourgeoisie to this painting, it's easy to assume that this man was forced into working himself to death. He wasn't forced through interpersonal violence, he wasn't whipped into working, but he was forced through structural violence. Perhaps he was in debt, perhaps he needed to work this hard to feed himself and his family, but whatever the case was, because he was denied from meeting his basic needs by a violent system, he had to work himself to death. The perpetrator of violence in this case isn't a person, it's not even a group of people, but a system that requires that kind of violence to function. This painting not only depicts the invisible violence of our economic system through the death of a worker, but shows the consequences that this violence has not only on the workers, but on their close ones. It depicts the powerlessness we feel in the face of the very visible consequences of an invisible violence. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you Mike Wex, Roman Brandel, Russell Chinchilla, and all my other patrons for supporting the channel. If you also want to help out, leave a like, subscribe, and check out patreon.com/thecanvas. Thank you so much.